But the problem is that governments don't recognize the 5 nations, so it still doesn't help us. But finally we got the Dutch flag. And I have to say the Dutch have been very, very supportive on this. And so we've met with them, and Japan's putting a lot of pressure on them, but we still have the Dutch flag. So we're thankful for that. But if we, by any event, lose the Dutch flag, we have another country, which I will not say who, but they're ready to give us the flag. So we're constantly trying to, battle up or shore up the tax that Japan is leveling on us at every opportunity. And of course, Japan the Japanese public relation firms, they go to the school of Joseph Goebbels, that if you tell a lie often enough, people begin to believe it. So all you ever hear from them is, we are eco-terrorists, eco-terrorists, eco-terrorists. There's no such crime anywhere called eco-terrorism. It doesn't exist. You cannot charge somebody with eco-terrorism because it doesn't exist. So it's all just public relations rhetoric. If you commit, we're not committing any crimes, so they can make all of these accusations that they want. This year, the Japanese did something which I thought was rather astounding. Lawyers never should ask questions they don't know the answers to in a courtroom, and diplomats should never make demands that they don't know what the results are going to be. And the Japanese publicly demanded that Australia prohibit us from entering their ports. And of course, they lost considerable face when Australia couldn't do that. The Australian government might want to do that, but we enjoy considerable and overwhelming support from Australian citizens, and that just was not going to happen. And we will continue to have the support of the Australian citizens, because Australia is one of the most, and New Zealand, are very passionate countries when it comes to defending whales. And that gives me a lot of hope, because in 1978, we were fighting whaling in Australia. And there was a whaling operation in Western Australia, and we were down there blocking those harpoons. We were opposing that. So 30 years, a whaling nation, 30 years later, has become one of the most passionate whale defending nations on the planet. And hopefully, 30 years from now, that will be Japan. And so I have hope that the Japanese people will take that point of view. Because most young Japanese people are opposed to whaling. And the problem is that there is still money to be made, and even though it only goes to about 5% of the population in the market, that's still enough to justify their industry. But the one thing they do understand is the language of profit and loss. And that's why I think we're winning on this, because we're costing their profits every year. And that's what we'll continue to do until we drive them out economically. And again, this is the reason we're going to win on the seal issue too. Europe is going to pass a motion to ban all seal products. Ireland actually on St. Patrick's Day banned all seal products without exemptions or loopholes. This week, Spain banned all seal products, as has the Netherlands, as has Germany, as has Belgium. So Canada's losing this battle. And the best indication of the fact that they're losing is that last week they raised their quota 55,000 to 338,000 seal pups, just to spite us, just to slap us in the face. They'll not get that quota because there's no money in it. The price of seal pelts has dropped from $100 to $40 to about $15 now, and there will soon be no market for it. Again, that's the language they understand, economics. And we have to make sure that we undermine the markets in order to win. Because every day that right now, senators and members of parliament from Canada are receiving 50 to 80,000 emails a day against the seal hunt, and it's doing nothing to stop them. Here to talk to you, and if you have any questions, I'd certainly be happy to address them. Thank you. The Japanese have is that if they injure or even kill us, their government will justify and defend their actions. And we have to be very much aware of that. Our disadvantage is we have to make sure we don't even sprain one of their fingers, because if we do, our governments will condemn us for it. So it's a very one-sided sort of thing. There is no way, because the other person on there was an Australian citizen, there is no way that Australia was going to allow a Japanese vessel to pull an Australian citizen out of the Australian Antarctic Territory and take him back to Japan and put him on trial. So we knew that we'd get him back, but that whole thing actually created quite a controversy. And then the Japanese did something really silly. They said, well, we'll release them if you meet our demands. At which point gave me the opportunity and says, I'm sorry, we don't negotiate with terrorists. I'm criticized all the time because, how can you risk human life to protect a whale? This is just unacceptable. I don't find it unacceptable at all. I think it's far more noble to risk your life to protect a whale, or even a shark or whatever. It's far more noble to do that than to risk your life and die defending some sheik's oil well in Iraq. We pin medals on people for that. So, we really got to get our priorities straight as to what is important. A couple of years ago, a ranger in Zimbabwe was taken to task by human rights groups because he shot and killed a poacher who was about to kill a black rhinoceros, and human rights group says you cannot justify taking a human life to protect an animal. And he said, well, I find that, this was in Time magazine he was quoted, he says, I find that rather strange, because if I was a police officer in Harare and a man ran out of Barclays Bank with a bag of paper money and I shot him in the head and killed him, you call me a hero and pin a medal on me. So how is it that a bag of paper has more value than the future heritage of the nation of Zimbabwe? Again, it's all our priorities. What we value, we defend violently, and what we don't value, we just simply don't defend. The diving community, well, we certainly have a lot of divers worldwide who are involved as volunteers. We have a group called Shark Angels right now, or 3 women who are going around. They're going to actually be producing a show for Animal Planet, and the whole thing is to go and swim with and do research on sharks like great whites and tiger sharks and everything, just to illustrate that they're not the great big monsters that everybody thinks. So that's one approach. Time was, what we do with our children is our business. And I said, no, child abuse is everybody's business. And right now they're suffering some very serious consequences in the Faroe Islands. Mercury is killing people. And we all, of course, have to be concerned about that. In the United States, you buy a can of tuna fish and it has right on the side of it, it says, not to be eaten by pregnant women or small children. I guess the rest of us are expendable. But the thing is that they're literally saying that there's poison in this product, but we're going to sell it anyway. And the other thing, too, is if you have cats, please don't feed tuna fish to cats. Cats are eating more tuna than all of the world's seals put together. I think it's 1.8 million tons of fish are taken by seals, 2.5 million tons are consumed by cats. And a bluefin or a yellowfin tuna or any tuna is not the natural prey of a kitty cat. That doesn't mean we're going to use less oil. We're addicted to the oil. It's a drug. I say everybody should get a Hummer and burn the stuff off as quickly as possible. Then we can get some alternatives on the ground. Because we're going to take the last drop of oil out of this planet no matter what anybody does. And there's just nothing that's going to be done about it because we're addicted to it. So we've got to find those alternatives. And the only way we ever really come up with alternatives is when we're put to the precipice of disaster. Right when we're about to get wiped out, then suddenly our brains go into overdrive and we find a solution. But right now we're just sort of limping along, on this oil crutch and getting by on it. The fact is, though, this planet cannot support 6, 7, 8 billion people without oil. The only reason that we have the populations that we have is because of oil. And if oil were removed, there's going to be some very serious consequences. Produced by Jim Clark, called The Cove. And what Jim did was pump $5 million into, he had cameras underwater, in the air, hidden in trees, hidden in rocks, and he recorded every facet of that slaughter. That's been released, and it's extremely embarrassing to Japan. And again, that's another example of where children are suffering because the dolphins that are killed are being fed to school lunch programs, highly contaminated with mercury, as is whale meat, of course.